Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, Simone here. Today I'm back with another one of my in-depth bookshelf tours Today we're doing shelf 3 on my big bookshelf that's in my living room. I will link down below the previous two bookshelves that I've done and also my overview of all my bookshelves if you want to go and check those out if you haven't already seen them. But yes, today is going to be my hardback books. This is a shelf that has a lot of similar books on, so this might not be the longest video of the lot. But yeah, let's get started and see what I've got. So the first one here is actually one that was just on the top of the shelf here, and this definitely wasn't in my bookshelf overview because I've actually got this book since then. So this is called Lips Touch 3 Times by Laini Taylor with illustrations by Jim DiBartolo. This is a book that I am reading hopefully for the Disney readathon that's happening in August. I won't give you any spoilers, but that's one of the books that I'm hoping to read. I really loved Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor, and so I really wanted to get another one of her books. This also has some amazing illustrations in, and this front cover just really drew me in, and I'm really excited about it. So yeah, this is definitely one that I'm looking forward to reading, and yes, I don't know anything about it really. Next up we have Blowfly by Patricia Cornwell. This is a book that I don't actually have the dust jacket for. It is a book in the it's a book that's in the Kay Scarpetta series, which you all know is one of my favourite series. And yeah, I don't actually know which book in the series this one is, but I have it on my shelf ready to read it as soon as I get to it. Yeah, because I don't have the dust jacket because I think I read this a while ago. Next up we have Cross the Line by James Patterson. This is one of the books in the Alex Cross series, again a series that I really love and that I've been reading from the beginning. I don't actually know again which book in the series this is, but I am really looking forward to being able to get to this one and having it on my shelf once I read all the others. Next up is Private Deli by James Patterson and Ashwin Sanghi. This is actually another one in the Private series. This is actually the next one that I have to read. If you don't know, I have mentioned before, but the Private series follows a kind of investigative branch who are across the whole world, and this one obviously is the private branch in Delhi, but there are, like I said, private companies across the whole of the world. I've read I think about 10 to 12 of these books now and I love them. A couple I've liked more than the others, but yeah, I just love them in general, and like I said, this is the next one that I need to read, so I'm very happy that I own it. Next up we have Thrill by Jackie Collins. Jackie Collins is an author that I've read for a long time. I have got rid of some of her books in my recent unhaul. I got rid of a few because I'd already read them, but I haven't actually read this one before, so I want to keep it until I have read it. I don't know too much about this other than it is pitched as an erotic psychological thriller, which, to be honest with you, sometimes I just really need that kind of a book, so I do like to keep these on my shelf just in case I feel like I need them. This book I don't know too much about the specifics. Generally Jackie Collins books have lots of characters and they tend to all have secrets and then they intertwine somehow, and at the end there's usually a big explosive ending, and yeah, I just love it. And the tagline for this one is "Kiss me, kill me, thrill me," so it could be very interesting and probably very sexual, as they usually are. Next up we have a non-fiction book, and this one is Under the Banner of Heaven, A Story of Violent Faith. On the front it says, on July the 24th, 1984, a woman and her infant daughter were murdered by two brothers who believed they were ordered to kill by God. The roots of their crime lie deep in the history of an American religion practiced by millions. So I believe this has something to do with the religion of Mormonism. I know that I don't know too much else about it. I think it's got something to do with polygamy as well, because I think Mormons practice polygamy, if I'm not completely wrong. I don't know, as I said, too much else about it. I've read two Jon Krakauer books before. I read Into the Wild and I've read Into Thin Air. Both of those talk about mountain climbing and kind of extreme physical activity, and as far as I know, this one is more to do with extreme religious beliefs. So yeah, I'm very looking forward to reading this, to be honest with you. I do love non-fiction, as I said, and if I haven't read this by November, I may read this as part of my non-fiction November TBR, but we never know. by, because by then I may have read it, who knows. But yeah, looking forward to this one. I've had this on my shelf for a little while now and very excited to read it. Next up we have the first of many Stephen King books on this shelf, because I do have a lot of Stephen King in hardback. This one is The Bazaar of Bad Dreams by Stephen King. It is a set of short stories. I have a couple of his short story collections and I haven't actually read any of them, so that is something that I would like to rectify fairly soon. I believe generally with Stephen King's short story collections, they tend to have a theme that runs through them, but they tend to be very different stories. I believe this particular one has a lot of themes to do with morality and guilt and death, and also whether you could change the outcome if you knew what was going to happen, I think. I know that one of the stories that's mentioned on the back talks about a columnist who kills people by writing their obituary, and I find that to be a very interesting concept. So yeah, I do love a Stephen King book anyway, and I've, like I said, not read his short stories before, so I'm interested to see if I like them as much as I like his full novels. Next up is Nightmares and Dreamscapes by Stephen King. This one is actually not a hardback, it just happens to be on the shelf because it's a taller book than most. However, this book is massive. So yeah, looking forward to this one again. It's another short story collection by Stephen King, and this one is about hell and glory, I think. I honestly don't know, to be honest, and I think the title probably gives most of that away. But yeah, again, I'm looking forward to reading a short story collection of Stephen King. Next up is the Bane Chronicles by Cassandra Clare, Sarah Rees Brennan and Maureen Johnson. This is a book I'm quite looking forward to reading. I believe this is a lot of short stories that involve Magnus Bane, who, to be honest with you, is one of my favourite characters in the Mortal Instruments series, which I recently finished. I know that Magnus Bane is a warlock, so he does not ever die. He is immortal. If I have it right, the Infernal Devices, which is the 3-book series that takes place before the Mortal Instruments, Magnus Bane I think is in those stories as well, because he, like I said, has lived the length of that time. So I think these stories tend to be around all of the series, I'm not sure. I do want to read this actually before I read the Infernal Devices though, so we'll see. I don't think it will spoil me, and if it does spoil me, it's not the end of the world to me, to be honest. I don't really have a big thing about that. So yeah, I'm looking forward to reading this series. Like I said, I do love Magnus Bane, and again, these are short stories, so I seem to have a lot of hardback short story collections, and I need to read them because I very rarely do read short stories, to be honest. Next up is My James, the heartrending story of James Bolger by his father, written by Ralph Bolger with Rosie Dunn. This book talks about a very kind of infamous case in the UK of a young boy named James Bolger who was abducted by two, I think they were quite young themselves. I want to say they were sort of like, were they 11 and 12? I'm not 100% sure of the exact details, but as far as I know, so James I think was 3, and he was abducted by these two sort of 11-year-old boys, and he was unfortunately killed by them, and lots of things happened to him before that happened, which is just horrendous. And this is a story that I've grown up knowing. It's a case that I've grown up having an awareness of, because I believe this actually happened in 1993, so I was born the year before this. So again, like I said, this is a story that throughout my life I've known about it. I know that recently a movie was made, much to the dismay of James Bolger's mum. I know she's campaigned quite a lot for that film to be like removed, or she didn't want it to get an Oscar because I think it was nominated, and I feel so much for her and for Ralph Bolger. I just think it's horrendous, and I think this is going to be an interesting book to read. Again, I think it's going to be really sad and really hard to read, because obviously this is talking about a man whose son was murdered at the age of like 3, and yeah, it's horrendous. So yeah, I do want to read this one, but like I said, I think this definitely has to be a book that I'm going to read when I'm in a very good state of mind mentally, in order for me to be able to deal with this. Next up we have Bridget Jones' Mad About the Boy by Helen Fielding. This I think is the 3rd or 4th book in the Bridget Jones series. Most people probably know have heard of or have seen the Bridget Jones movies. I think there are 3 now, and I personally really love them. I have to say though, personally, I just prefer the books. I love the films, don't get me wrong, but I just have an affinity with the books, I think, because I read them when I was, I read them before I watched the movies. Mad About the Boy, I think, takes place quite a bit of time after the other ones, and the only reason I say that is because this one does tend to have a lot of like things to do with technology, so like texting and dating in a world with social media and that kind of thing, and yeah, I think this could be really funny. I have to read it. I haven't read it yet. I do need to. Now there is a funny story about how I got this book, and I had, so about 3 or 4 years ago, a pharmacist that I used to work with, who I was really close with, and I love Doris, if you're watching, I don't know if you watch these, sometimes you do, but I love you, Doris. She actually gave me this book to borrow. Like I said, it was ages ago, and then she moved and I still had the book, and then I hadn't given it back to her, and I still have it. So Doris, if you're watching this and you do want it back, do let me know your address, because I will send it to you, my love. Otherwise I'm going to read this at some point. Yeah, I love Bridget Jones, and who doesn't? So yeah, definitely a read that I'm hopefully going to get to soon. Up next we actually have a book that I have read before. This is 11/22/63 by Stephen King, and this is a huge book. It's about 800-900 pages, something like that. And this is a time travel novel set in a world where, so a man is trying to go back to stop the assassination of JFK, which takes place on the 22nd of November in 1963. This book I thought was fantastic. It was a 5-star. It was definitely a great read for me. It is a big book, granted, but personally I found that it was really enjoyable, and so much so that I think it was worth reading it for that long. It's not a scary book, so if you're kind of nervous about Stephen King, because obviously he's well known for his kind of scary books, this is not that. This is a great story and definitely a good read. I don't normally love time travel, or I didn't before this book, but this book completely changed my mind on that, and I love time travel in books now. So yeah, definitely a great read, and definitely one that really will make you think. Then we have Allegiant by Veronica Roth. This is the final book in the Divergent trilogy. I've read the first book in that series, and I actually did really enjoy it. I quite liked the movie as well. I know a lot of people didn't love that as much, and I don't think the others have been made into movies. I could be wrong. I think I might have mentioned this before and someone corrected me, so if it was you, please correct me again. I haven't watched them anyway, even if they have been. This follows a world where you get put into a faction-based society, so you get put into a faction, or you pick a faction when you're of a certain age, and then you have to that faction becomes your family. So the main character Triss, in the first book at least, she picks a faction that is not what her family belonged to, like her biological family, and so then it's about what happens then. The first book, like I said, was really good. I really want to read this one, but I obviously need to read the second one first, which is Insurgent. I do have that one somewhere, so I do need to get to that, but who knows when that's going to be. Next up we have The Girl in the Spider's Web by David Lagerkrantz, continuing Stieg Larsson's Millennium series. You all know how much I adored the Millennium series. I think I mentioned this in my in the bookshelf too. I mentioned the next one in the series to this, so I've obviously said this little spiel before, but I really love reading about Lisbeth and Mikael, who are in the original trilogy. I've read the first 2 of the original trilogy by Stieg Larsson. I've read The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo and The Girl Who Played with Fire. I still need to read The Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest, and then I think this is the next one. So I think this is the first book that David Lagerkrantz wrote, because unfortunately Stieg Larsson passed away, so he wants to continue the series. I do own as well The Girl Who Takes an Eye for an Eye. Like I said, if you watch my bookshelf too, you'll see that, which I think is the 5th one, and I don't know, but I think he's written a 6th, or he's writing one. Yeah, again, this follows Mikael Blomkvist, who is a journalist, and he teams up with Lisbeth Salander to try to figure out what happened to a girl who went missing about 20 years before. I don't know what specifically this book is about, because obviously that was the first one, and it has moved on a lot in the second one, let alone the third. So yeah, very much looking forward to reading this book when I get to it, and I'm interested to see how David Lagerkrantz can continue Stieg Larsson's work, and if I like it just as much. The next one we have is Trace by Patricia Cornwell. I'm not going to talk about this too much because again this is another one in the Dr. K. Scarpetta series. I don't know which book in the series this is. I think it must be one that's quite a way onwards. But yeah, I have no idea, but very much looking forward to reading it when I get there. Next up we have Lisi Story by Stephen King. This is another one that I am really looking forward to. It's obviously another Stephen King book. This is actually a novel, quite a big one at that as well. This one is one that I haven't heard loads about, but I do believe this is probably going to be quite scary. I think this is about a woman who is going through her husband's effects after he passes away, and then she then gets a bit of a nasty shock. I don't know what the shock is. I am very looking forward to it. And yeah, another Stephen King I can't wait to read. Next up we have another short story collection by Stephen King, and this one is Full Dark No Stars. I don't know anything specifically about it other than it has 4 stories in it. I know the very first story in this one though is 1922, which I believe is a Netflix film, and I've actually seen the film already, so I'm really interested in seeing how the book or story compares and how they've managed to adapt that into the film. I really enjoyed the film personally. It was it followed what happens in a family where the wife proposes selling off the family farm to the husband, and I won't talk about anything else because it will be huge spoilers. Like I said, there are 3 other stories in this as well. I don't know anything about them. Like I said, looking forward to reading it though. We then have Rose Madder by Stephen King. Again, not one I know loads about. This is a novel that follows, I believe, a woman who wakes up one morning and realises that her husband is out to kill her. I don't know how she works that out or why that happens. He is a police officer. Her husband is a police officer who I believe is like a corrupt cop, and she can sort of sense him getting closer, and she's trying to figure out what's going on. And then I believe there's a painting called Rose Madder that she kind of gets drawn into buying, and it's about what happens next. Again, like I said, not too much of a clue. Very much looking forward to it. I love Stephen King in general, so any book of his I'm really wanting to read. Next up is a really beautiful book, and this is Moriarty by Anthony Horowitz. On the front it says, Sherlock Holmes is dead and darkness falls. So I think Anthony Horowitz has written a few books in this series, and I think they tend to be following what would happen if Sherlock had died and something. I don't know what Moriarty has to do with it, or I know obviously Moriarty's in Sherlock, but in terms of I don't know what that means for the story, I have no idea. There's a surprise. There's a theme on this shelf. But yeah, I got given this by my dad, I think. He read it and really liked it, and then passed it on to me to read. So yeah, it's definitely one I would like to get to, but I don't really know anything else about it. And then the final book on this shelf is The Hanged Man by Simon Koenig. I've read a Simon Koenig book before and really liked it. He is a kind of thriller cop type author. So this book in particular follows, in this book 7 women have just been found murdered in a house, and it follows, I believe, a cop who is determined to find out what's happened, and he's trying to track down a man who witnessed it, who is now in fear for his life because he's terrified he's going to be killed off because obviously he was the witness. I don't know anything further than that, but it sounds really interesting to me. I do love books from the kind of police perspective, and yeah, love this, and I would love to read another Simon Koenig book as well. So then we are going to go on to my video shout out of this video, and I would like to shout out the wonderful Maggiiiemayyy. I will link her channel down below. I love Maggie's channel. I think that she's amazing. She does some really great videos. Her vlogs are really wonderful. And I really enjoy watching her life. She recently did a bookshelf tour that I think you should go and check out. She's really close to 500 subscribers, so I do think that you should all go and check her out. I think she's wonderful, and I 100% recommend her channel. Please give her some love. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I shall see you next time for a new video. Bye guys!